Hello and welcome to the Owl Hoot podcast with me, Caroline Norbury. In each episode, I chat to amazing guests with way more expertise than me on topics covering the environment and sustainability. You'll get to hear the facts on climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution, as well as discover the fabulous actions that individuals and organisations are doing to mitigate and adapt to our changing world. I don't know about you, but I find it reassuring and hopeful that there are so many capable people out there doing great things for our planet, as well as inspiring me to get on and do my bit too. So without further ado, let's get on with this week's episode. Andy Extance is with me today in his capacity as Marketing Director of Exeter Community Energy, a social enterprise generating renewable energy. In addition to this role, Andy is a freelance science journalist, chair of the Association of British Science Writers, director of editorial services company Exeter Empirical, and editor-in-chief of Science Seeker. Andy trained as a chemist, worked in early-stage drug discovery research, and briefly in silicone, adhesive and rubber manufacturing, before becoming a full-time science writer. By joining Exeter Community Energy, Andy aspired to win a battle on climate change. I'm keen to discover if this role has delivered on this and know more about how community energy works. Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Hi, Caroline. Thanks for having me.
You are most welcome. So I'm really looking forward to delving deep into community energy today, but I'd like to start with finding a bit about where your interests lay, how a bit about your career and your background and your chemistry and what have you. So fire away.
Yeah, well, you covered it quite well in the intro there. Yeah, so I am a science writer. Like yourself, I think, to some extent, I have made quite an effort to communicate about climate change. I write about climate change quite a lot and just putting the finishing touches to an article about using ammonia as a clean fuel for shipping. But so the communicating side of things is good, and it's good to do that. But I also really itched to do something quite practical. I come from a background where I have worked in the industry. When I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, I was involved in some quite large projects, £100 million, maybe $100 million contract, I think, probably slightly less, worth slightly less than £100 million, but and managing kind of around a quarter of the production of the molecules that were involved in that. And so I've got a fair amount of project management experience, and I felt like I wanted to do something very practical. And so coming on to Exeter Community Energy via the communications side of things gave me the opportunity to do something much more practical, using those project management skills I've had that I've developed in the past. And that's very much how it's turned out. I think I've come on board. I've helped ECOE, Exeter Community Energy, quite a lot with the communications, and I've also, as time has gone on, got to be more involved with some of the solar projects and deployment.
Okay.
I came on board in 2018, which was several years after the organisation was started. They were looking for new directors and advertising, voluntary directors, that is. I mean, I'm an investor in Exeter Community Energy. I was one of the first investors. I think it was in 2016 when we all put our money in. So I get some benefit from the interest on the investment, but otherwise it's all voluntary. But I think it's really worthwhile.
Absolutely.
And in terms of that battle, it's been good, and I was able to take the lead managing a couple of the two newest sites that ECOE has deployed, and I was the project manager for that. And so getting those deployed at the beginning of last year during the pandemic, right when it was starting out, was challenging, a bit fraught, but also very rewarding. And I do feel like I've now won my battle, a battle, but I'm now up for more.
Yeah, you've probably got your hands dirty now. So it sounds
Mm,
like you were aware of Eco when it was starting.
mm.
How did it all start? How did it all come together? Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so I think it was started in 2014. I think there were about 8 founding directors, and they came out of the Transition Exeter group that I think they discussed setting up a community energy group in 2013. ECO itself was founded in 2014 and then moved towards raising funds from the community in 2016. So that's the
Yeah.
story. It basically comes out of Transition Exeter.
And you talk about raising funds. What were those funds specifically for?
Well, there's a certain amount of startup funding. I think initially it was quite small amounts, like a few £1,000s here or there. There were quite, I think the majority of the funding initially came from individuals, I think possibly largely from the Transition Exeter group, but it was a combination of donations and kind of advance investments in the renewable projects. But there were a few £1,000s from the Exeter board, which is a joint committee of Exeter City and Devon County councillors, some from the Quaker Sustainability Fund. We got some funds from Department of Energy and Climate Change, all of the and Energy Saving Trust, Nature Save Trust,
Oh,
Devon
gosh.
Community Energy Accelerator Programme, all of which were a few £1,000s, but they very much helped with the startup funding. The organisation, our initial chair and CEO, Jill Wyatt, drove a lot of this and was absolutely essential to getting the organisation up and running. And so that money helped pay for her time. And then back in 2014, 2015, 2016, there was a fund called the Urban Community Energy Fund, which specifically was available to support community energy type activities in cities, but that no longer exists. But yeah, we had £18,000 from that as well.
So lots of different places the money came from. And
Yeah, and eco has always been very embedded in Exeter and in our community. We've always had very deep roots and good connections with the councils and lots of different groups. I think that's really been one of our strengths and probably one of the overall strengths of community energy.
okay, well, that's a good point. That all those collaborations are quite key to it getting off the ground. So when you raised this money, what was the first thing you bought with it?
Well, okay, I mean that's the kind of startup funding. So that then got us as far as then doing a share offer, with which we raised, I think it's about 400,000, which we then would spend on different solar projects. I think 390,000, I think it was.
So why was it decided that you talked, obviously you've mentioned there it was solar projects, and obviously the eco group was all about renewable energy. Why was it decided that it would be a solar project to start with?
Often that's a key part of the community energy model. I mean, there are all sorts of different community energy groups across the country, and they do all have different activities. And even today we have quite different activities between solar generation and kind of renewable energy. So yeah, there's the renewable energy generation, but there's also energy saving and energy poverty work. But part of a lot of the models of community energy groups is to partner with community organizations in order to supply them with electricity at a discount to what what you get from the grid, which is especially topical right now.
Hmm. Yes, isn't it?
Yeah. So the thing about solar, you can put it on the roof of buildings. And so our particular model is all about rooftop solar. And we put it on buildings of community organizations. So some businesses, a lot of non-profit type organizations, I've got a church, community halls, things like that. So we are helping the community in terms of reducing their energy bills, reducing their carbon footprint, and but they're helping us by giving us the space to help them, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. So the premises that have got the solar panels on them, such as the church or the other community buildings, those particular institutions or organizations, they themselves benefit because they're getting cheaper renewable electricity. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So it saves them money, and it
Yeah.
also reduces their carbon footprint. And I mean, particularly so, the church is Pinhoe Road Baptist Church in Exeter, and they have also benefited. Part of the model, so there's a number of different parts to the model. So I'll talk you through it.
Sure.
I know you're
Please do.
interested in some of these things. So we've used this £390,000 of investment from people. Most of the investors are just average Joes in the local community, and we use that to buy the solar panels and put them on the roofs. We then get income from the sites for the electricity that they buy from us. We can export some of the electricity to the grid, and we get some income from that. For the early installations, up until those that we did last year, we also get feed-in tariff subsidies. So we get government money that subsidizes the solar electricity generation. All of that money comes into Exeter Community Energy, and then we pay our investors interest at 5% per year, which is pretty good. But then we tend to have a surplus which goes into a community fund,
Right.
which is available for local organisations to apply for projects related to energy saving or fighting energy poverty. And Pinhoe Road Baptist Church, who we were talking about particularly there, they not only benefit from having the lower electricity price that we offer them, but they've also successfully applied for a number of grants from our community fund to install more energy efficient lighting as well. So there's a lot of benefits to the community from our model, and there's various different ways that people and organizations can benefit.
That's excellent, because there seems like lots of benefits in lots of different directions. How easy is it to set up an installation, like choosing a particular premise and getting all the relevant bodies agreed that it can go on that particular roof?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a real struggle. And certainly, I think, again, ECOE has a lot to thank Jill White, our founding chair and CEO, for, because she is extremely tough and very
Resilient.
determined to do these things. And having done a couple of the installations myself now, I know exactly how challenging it is. Yeah, there aren't that many sites that the model can work for. You need one which especially now that the feed-in tariff subsidies have gone, you ideally need a site that has fairly large on-site energy consumption in order to make it financially viable for ECOE. With the higher energy prices, it might be that we can, our prices might go up on new installations and we'll still be saving people some money, which might make it viable in the non feed-in tariff world. But you have to think about the character of the site, and ideally it would have reasonably large energy consumption that you would be switching over from being grid and therefore probably mostly gas to being, at least during the day, mostly solar.
So it would be no good having a really nice big building with a big roof, but actually they're not using a whole lot of energy within that building. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I mean, if it was a nightclub or something that wasn't open during the day, it wouldn't work for us very well.
Sure.
So legal ease is the thing that Jill always talked about, which is you would ideally like an organization that owns their own building and they can say who doesn't do things to it. That's not always the case, and we have a number of sites that are leased from local councils. As I say, we're really lucky that our local councils are very supportive, but it is quite time consuming going through the legal processes of getting the permission to put things on those roofs.
Because of the complexity of that process, do you then require to bring in sort of expertise that can deal with all the legal requirements surrounding who gets to say whether those panels can go up in the first place, sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really lucky, ECOE is really lucky in that we have a director, Sonia Bedford, who's an energy solicitor at Stephen Scown, solicitors in Exeter. She's actually, I think, probably nationally renowned in the renewable energy world. She's got an MBE for services to renewable energy, or possibly community energy. But either way, she's currently, you may or may not be aware that Bristol is investing something like £1 billion in renewable energy, and Sonia's currently quite tied up with the procurement on that, I believe. But yeah, so she's extremely knowledgeable on the legal aspects of renewable energy, and yeah, so Stephen Scown does a lot of work for ECOE. We do pay them for that work, but they also are very generous towards us in terms of providing us with support of all kinds. So that really helps. But actually, it's worth knowing that across the country, I think it's at least 200 community energy groups. And there's an organisation called Community Energy England, where they all get together. And if you don't have a Sonia on your board as a community energy group, there's plenty of knowledge within the Community Energy England community, and they're all very happy to share knowledge, and actually quite, the process is quite similar between different parts of the country, so that knowledge is very transferable. And I think in Devon as well, there's, I want to say 20, but there's a lot of groups where I live in Devon, and so we have a county-wide network as well where we share knowledge, and so there's a lot of support between community energy groups as well that really helps for these complicated issues.
Sure. So you've joined like even a larger community because there are other people trying to do it, and they're all sharing knowledge, which is lovely, that you're able to benefit each other rather than seen as sort of competitors. You're just all trying to do lovely things together in different parts of the country.
I think there's enough of a degree of competition that it inspires us all to try and do a little bit better when you see that other people are doing better. So it's that kind of being motivated because you can see what other people are achieving.
Yeah, you mentioned that you've obviously been involved in some later installations, because I thought perhaps once you've done one, all subsequent ones are perhaps easier, but it doesn't sound like it necessarily is the case. What was your experience?
Well, it's a bit of a moving, everything, it's changing. So like the situation with feed-in tariffs in the UK, subsidies, where solar subsidies were quite generous initially, and I think they were always designed to taper out and go away as the price of solar went down. So in a sense, that's, makes things challenging, but there's also the low-hanging fruit situation where your first projects are likely to be the ones that are most accessible, like the low-hanging fruit on the tree. And so your later projects might not be quite so easy. So there's that issue as well. But it will be, the current situation with energy prices in the UK in particular, where they are very high at the moment, might well trigger a new round of projects now becoming possible that weren't previously.
I just wanted to pick up on that, the fact that you said that feed-in tariffs are no longer in existence. Does that mean the ones that you started with feed-in tariffs, you still get feed-in tariff money for that? And you also mentioned that the lower costs of solar, does that help the fact that you've lost the feed-in tariff, but actually the price of buying the installation is cheaper?
Yeah, so we do still receive the same income that we were originally granted from the old site. So that is there for the life, or for the 20-year lifetime of the project. The income will be at the same rate, but the newer projects are at a lower rate. So what effectively has happened is it means that we can't be as generous to the sites in terms of the degree of discount on their electricity. We're looking to make up more of our income from selling electricity rather than from a government subsidy.
So the financials are still, even though it's changed and it's become slightly more difficult by the sounds of it, it's still sufficient to be able to make new projects viable.
Yeah, the costs have the costs of solar have come down a lot, and I think at the start it may well be that you needed to offer quite a big reduction in electricity costs to encourage people to take the risk of adopting the community energy solar model. But now it's got a fairly decent track record, so people are happier with a slightly lower reduction in their electricity costs, but also people are very much more aware of the need to reduce emissions, and there are, organizations really are looking at that, and it may be that people might consider paying a premium under certain circumstances for knowing that they're getting clean electricity. Not that we've really explored that all that much, but I think looking forward,
Sure,
it might be a possibility.
So just to be really clear then, you've got people that, like yourself, have put money in and you're getting like a 5% annual income off that. What happens after, you talked about a 20-year period, what happens after 20 years to the project, to the money that's been invested?
It's the key question, isn't it? So the business model for Exeter Community Energy is such that throughout the 20-year lifespan of the project, that it's budgeted to pay people back on their shares through the course of that. People will probably want their money back to do things. Maybe they'll want to buy a bigger house or whatever. So when we started out, I think it was a 3-year period at which we said that people had to keep their money in, and then after that point people are free to withdraw their investment. So we're the income that's being generated is all budgeted towards gradually paying down that investment, and then at the end, the original vision was to pay that back. But what's happened is, with new projects coming in, the duration of ECOE's life has been extended. So we did the first installations, I think, in late 2015 actually. And then we've done a couple more last year, so that's 5 years after the first one. So ECOE itself is definitely going to be in existence for 25 years after it was originally, the first solar panels were put up. And if we do more projects, then that's going to roll us on to being a bit more long-lived. So there's a kind of balancing act of money coming in, money going out, and that's it's the transition from getting the organization up and running to then being one that continues and has a clear vision of what else it might do beyond its initial intentions is a fairly big challenge. It's probably one of the main challenges, and there's clearly more we can do. I think we would like to have more solar projects. We're working on some more solar projects, but actually we're also learning there's a lot, potentially much more to be gained from things like energy efficiency, energy saving, insulation, retrofit, things like that we're getting increasingly involved with as well. So yeah, in terms of people's money, they get it back pretty much whenever they want it, and if they want, if when the 20-year duration, any particular roof is intended to last for 20 years. When they end, then the investments in those roofs, any outstanding investments will be paid back to the investors. but there may be other projects by that point that we might want them to, invite them to keep their money in, and we'll put it in something else. The ownership of the solar panels at that stage passes to the organizations that are partners where the panels are located. They should still be good energy generating panels by that point. At some point beyond that in the future, the panels may well stop being worth having. And when that happens, the solar industry has a scheme for recycling solar panels. So it's not like the sites will be lumbered with them, but we haven't really got to the stage where the recycling has had to kick off in really big scales. So it's not entirely clear how that's going to pan out right now, but certainly the industry has committed to providing that facility. So we'll all have to do our best to hold them to their intentions on that one.
Sure. And just going back to the other benefits of the income that you're putting into the community, what sort of things are you doing around the fuel poverty that you mentioned earlier?
So yeah, the fuel poverty activity that we have at ECOE is called Healthy Homes for Wellbeing, and it's become really prominent in the last few years. I think it was probably just starting when I came on board in 2018, and it's gone from strength to strength. I think, we've got, I want to say maybe 10 part staff now. It's in that ballpark. It kind of bobs up and down a little bit, who advise people on how to improve the energy efficiency of their homes. They could be, quite a lot of people are actually tenants, because it's targeting people who are in fuel poverty in particular. We have trained advisors, those staff I mentioned, who have all been trained by one of our partners who are called Leap, and they are able to advise on various matters like how to deal with debts related to energy, how to access funding. In particular, there's funding which again confusingly is called ECO, but for boilers. It's not strict. It's a more centrally organized energy industry scheme. But yes, if there is funding available for people who have problems with their boilers, who might not be able to afford to deal with them. Various other funding matters, simple measures we give away simple energy saving measures like energy saving light bulbs, panels, reflective panels that will go behind radiators that might be on external walls to stop the energy just seeping right out to the outdoors, and advice on other insulation. And we've also got we provide access to funding for emergency matters, like we seem to be providing quite a lot of fridges, things like that, and odd things like people who don't have doors on their ovens.
Is that a thing?
Certainly some of the advisors say that they see it quite a lot when they go around to people. I was just heard on the radio this morning, Marcus Rashford, who's the English footballer, who's been doing a lot of campaigning for poverty, and he was talking about how his family would in the past have had to choose between food and fuel. And this is a thing that happens a lot with fuel poverty, and that we see a lot with healthy homes. And so you have to choose between the things that you can afford to deal with. And if at some point your oven door breaks, it means that you can't use your oven to cook with, but you probably have to prioritize other things above and beyond getting your oven door fixed. So sometimes the connection to saving energy can be tenuous, but that's where it's about dealing with the fuel poverty, rather that that's where the fuel poverty aspect takes primacy over the energy saving aspect, but they're all interrelated.
Sure. It sounds like a really useful resource. How do people in the community know that that money is available to them?
We do a lot of drop-in clinics around Devon. We do quite a lot of Devon, although we are primarily located in Exeter. I think we do East Devon, Mid Devon, Teignmouth, and Torbay as well for these. And so we do a lot of clinics in community centres around those areas. We train referrers, a lot of partners in the local health services, local councils. So if they find that they're dealing with people who are in fuel poverty and having problems, then they know to refer them to us for help. And we try and promote and advertise ourselves or as organically as possible. And that's part of my job as marketing director, is to try and make sure that we get out there. But Healthy Homes is quite autonomous. It's funded. Not a great deal of the funding that they get comes from the solar power. If any, they might have had some at the start. It's actually largely funded indirectly from the energy companies. They put the money into LEAP, who I mentioned earlier, and it's through a process called the Energy Company Obligation, another thing which is called ECOE.
Great. Of course. Catchy phrase.
We've got ECOEs all over the shop. And so, in effect, at some point, I think it might be a few decades, I'm not 100% sure on that one, but some point in the past, a government put in some legislation to make sure that the quasi-monopoly of energy companies didn't mean that they exploited the very poorest, or at least if they did, then they put some investments in to help support them. And in effect, ECO is being funded by that to do that job.
Okay. Parts of knowing, navigating through the organisation and getting it to work really well is drawing on all these different partnerships and collaborations, by the sounds of it. You've got your communications.
We are very
is very
embedded.
important. Communications, which is your cover, is very important.
And it's really interesting. Certainly, we are very embedded in our local community, and a lot of organisations know who we are. And I suppose probably the people we've helped through Healthy Homes know who we are and might remember who we are. But I wouldn't say that we're that well known otherwise in our local community, because there's not above and beyond, Healthy Homes is the main reason that people have to interact with us on a day-to-day basis until we have a new project to set up some more renewable energy generation. For anybody who's outside that group who would need help from Healthy Homes, there's not a great deal of reason to interact with us otherwise.
Sure.
So it's quite, from a marketing perspective, that's quite an interesting challenge and situation, I suppose. I think we'd all like to be well known in our community, and we are, but only in very specific groups.
Now, you're up for this social enterprise award. Will that help getting, or will that just be that'll within the energy community you'll become more well known rather than on the ground?
Well, hopefully, if we win, hopefully it might get us a little bit more attention. And it's really nice to be shortlisted, and it's actually a reflection of primarily how well Healthy Homes has been doing, and just they have saved some really, really impressive amounts of money.
Been a worthwhile occupation.
Yeah, so I think it was over $1 million between September 2020 and March 2021. Healthy Homes for Wellbeing helped 1,145 households save over £1 million collectively, which is nearly £900 per household.
I mean, that's huge, isn't it?
They're done an amazing job, and certainly, they deserve the shortlisting. And we're up against some tough competitors, including, I think my money is on a company called Toast. I don't know if you've heard them.
Toast
Ale. But they make beer. Yeah, beer out of waste bread. So yeah, we're up against them and some others. So I've got a feeling that Toast is likely to win. But it's nice to be shortlisted, and I don't think it's a problem for us not being better known as much as we would like to. More, it's perhaps vanity, as long as the people we need to reach know us. that's the main thing. So
yeah, you're doing an excellent job. In terms of the community energy across the UK, how do you think it's going to look in 2050?
that's a really good question. I mean, so the first round of 20-year model projects will have come and gone, about 20 years, at least 15 years before. So community energy will have had to just, find new ways of existing. I think what I would really like community energy to build on that and go from strength to strength. I think there is a real power in this non-profit model, and it gives normal people the power to do things that would normally be limited to much wealthier, much, people from much higher, in inverted commas, socioeconomic groups. I think it allows people to do things that they might not otherwise have access to, and I think that's really powerful. And I'd very much like community energy to build on that and expand that as a possibility, and keep on going. We would want to have a lot of the renewable energy projects, and they would all be deployed, and running by 2050. But I guess given that all energy plants have a lifespan, there will need to be new plants, new projects to replace the old ones. And so there's probably a pipeline from that perspective, and hopefully we will continue to learn as a community and be able to improve the way in which we operate. One thing that's really interesting at the moment is community energy groups are increasingly getting involved in improving the housing stock, and ECOE's working towards doing that. So you have various options, building new houses that have much better energy efficiency than they would have if you just let people like the mainstream house builders do it, who actively campaign to lower the energy standards that they're required to follow, meaning that the housing in the UK is nowhere near as energy efficient as it should be.
Yeah.
So some of our fellow groups in Devon are building new houses with high energy performance. What ECOE is working towards is retrofit. So as well as helping those people who are in fuel poverty, we will be offering services to advise people on how to make their existing properties much more energy efficient. And I imagine that that's another area where community energy will begin to start making a difference, and that will hopefully be something that we can continue by 2050. We'll hope that the housing stock is much better.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that new buildings will still be being built by then, and I would like to see community energy continuing to push profit-making organizations who, for whatever reason, believe that it's in their shareholders' interests to reduce the environmental standards of the products that they are constructing and selling. I'd like to see community energy groups continue to push them and offer an alternative, possibly even become active competitors that can really drive some change in the housing sector.
That game certainly needs to be raised, doesn't it? Because it's we've got such a huge existing housing stock that will need retrofitting, let alone putting new houses up that aren't up to the job. So that's a really important and interesting area that you're going into. Finally then, Andy, more on a personal note, you're obviously well into environment and climate issues, and you've blogged about it and you've written about it and are writing about it. What in your own life are the sorts of changes that you've made as a result of your exploration into this field?
Well, I think the number one thing is getting involved with ECOE has given me an outlet to pour all of the energy and the frustration and general upsetness about the fact that nothing ever seems to get done about the environment and the climate in particular. It's really given me a channel to try and do things, and it's slow progress. We're not changing the world in a hurry, but we are achieving things, and that's great.
Sure.
And I would encourage other people who are in a similar place to how I was before I started doing this to reach out. There are probably community energy groups near you. Reach out, offer to volunteer. If they're anything like ECOE, they're probably looking for voluntary directors to help steer the organization, and it will absorb as much energy and frustration as you want to pour into it, I think.
I think that's a top recommendation you've given there.
Yeah. So if you have got lots of energy and lots of frustration to work out, the opportunity is definitely there. But not everybody can do that. I mean, life takes up an awful lot of time, just keeping yourself fed and a roof over your head. And, you may not have a great deal of time to spend. So conversations, I guess. I have changed how I speak to people, I think, in recent years in terms of the things that I have done. It's less about trying to convince people by pointing out where they're wrong, and it's more about telling people what I'm doing and setting an example, and just kind of other people can think about it whatever they will. But we're funny creatures, humans, and we like to think that we've got very clear minds, and certainly it's hard to change someone's mind by actively debating them and trying to tell them that they're wrong. But actually, we can be quite easily swayed by the things we see and the people we're around. Not if they start annoying us and upsetting us and, like I say, telling us we're wrong, but you probably want to be like the other people in your life who you like. So telling the people who you like in your life what you're doing is going to be a much easier sell than trying to convince somebody who you don't even know, who is going to be possibly the last person to ever change their mind on these things. So, I mean, I've changed. That's another thing I've done in terms of marketing, I suppose.
Yeah, and you know what, and that is excellent point that you've made, Andy, because you're so right. You're being brave to just tell people this is what I'm doing, but putting it out there without there's no judgment. There's you just saying this is what I'm up to, and you're kind of leaving it with them without saying, this is what I'm up to. What are you doing? Or why are you doing it that way? You're just saying, hello, this is me. And I think that's got to be a really positive way of getting messaging out there.
And I think, I don't know to the extent to which you're familiar with this debate about whether action on climate change is personal or institutional. The sense that you can do things, if you cut your own carbon footprint, is that enough? Or should we be pushing for change from large organizations, for example, or the government? And it's clear that both of these are true, but by embodying the change that we need to see, you can drive both. I think that's where the personal becomes political and organizational. You're doing the things that need to be done, but you can then bring that to places like your workplace or other organizations you're involved with, and not only you can tell people what you're doing personally, and you can ask, well, why are we not doing this here, in my job at a large company, or in my job at a local council, or as a civil servant, or or even at a small shop, or wherever else you work. So why are we not doing these things that I've done in my life and are not as hard as you would think they are?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, that's a really good place to end on. So, Andy, thanks very much for your time, and yeah, carry on the good work.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks to Andy for giving us such a terrific overview of what community energy is all about. I love the fact that a community can really get involved with helping to mitigate climate change by generating green energy, and in doing so raise additional funds that can be used for other community projects. It feels really exciting and impactful. So if you're thinking you want to get involved in a project, see if there's an energy group near you, or perhaps you want to start one of your own. You can find links to the community energy groups for England, Wales and Scotland in the show notes. There are also similar projects going on all over Europe too. I'd like to thank Andy Shaw for audio editing, Jeremy Jones for providing the music, and to you, of course, for listening. Don't forget you can subscribe to get automatic access to each new episode. And it would be lovely if you could rate, review and share the podcast too. Until next time, bye for now.